Today I'm going to be making a new t-shirt bag out of an old t-shirt. In order to make your t-shirt bag, you're first going to need an old t-shirt. You will also need things such as a ruler, a marker, and a pair of scissors. For step one, you're going to want to turn your t-shirt inside out and lay it flat on the table. So when thinking of making your t-shirt bag, what you want to do is cut the bottom of your t-shirt into strips. And ideally the strips should be about 4 inches long from the bottom and 1 to 2 inches wide. So once you've marked up the bottom of your t-shirt, you're going to want to start by cutting the end right here. And then going through and making sure you're cutting both sides of your t-shirt. Once you have all your strips cut up, what you want to start doing is taking both sides and tying them into knots. Now, you might want to make the knots a little tight to prevent having kind of holes in between each knot. So once all your knots are tied, the bottom of your shirt will look kind of bunched up, which is how you want it to look. If you would like your tassels to show, like in this example here, don't turn your shirt inside out in the beginning. Just leave it forward facing so that the tassels can be shown. If you want them hidden, turn the shirt inside out. So now that we have our tassels all tied up here, we can start making the bag look. So when you're cutting your sleeves off, notice that I've left a large amount of space here, and that's on purpose because we want to make sure that when we're using it as a bag, that part doesn't get overstretched and is too thin to hold the items we would like. The other thing we want to consider is how big of an opening we want in our bag. So when cutting off the collar, you can go back and use your marker to either trace a larger opening, but still keeping in mind not to cut down the shoulder too much. So you can trace out a larger kind of opening for your bag to kind of get the bag look. And then you can cut that yourself. So once your bag is all cut up, you can turn it inside out and the tassels will be covered. Now, when you're cutting up your bag, you might want to turn it back inside out before cutting off the collar in case you want to keep an image preserved that was on the front of the t-shirt. So here's our finished new bag. Now next time that you go to the grocery store, you don't have to ask for a plastic or paper bag, and you don't have to buy a reusable one because you've made your own. Shopping, eating, even when we are traveling, packaging is used and discarded in our daily lives. Whether we open boxes, unwrap items, wrap up gifts, drink and eat from containers, store belongings, we rely on secure and dependable packaging. However, packaging can play a different role that may not even be considered, such as with convenience. For example, frozen dinners where a plate is not even needed, or even for communication. For example, marketing with logos and names for products. No matter where we look, packaging is there. It's everywhere. But where did it all start? From the earliest points in time, humans have identified a need for packaging. Food was consumed not far from where it was found or caught. However, humans quickly realized the need to store food and other items. Early containers consisted of materials provided by nature, dried and hollowed gourds, shells, clay, bark, and even leaves. As time went on, humans began to make packaging materials out of these items, such as woven grasses, reeds, animal hides, which were used as bags and baskets. This allowed early humans to travel farther from food sources, transport food that was found, and store foods for future meals. As ore and other more sturdy compounds were found, packaging evolved even further into items such as pottery and metal items. As we evolved, so did the packaging materials we commonly use today: glass, paper, metals, and plastics. Glass is one of the oldest forms of packaging and thought to have been used as early as 7000 BCE. It was an outgrowth of clay pottery. In these early days, pieces of naturally occurring glass were fitted together using clay and other materials. Around 3500 BCE, the first man-made glass was created in eastern Mesopotamia and Egypt. The Egyptians would use materials such as limestone, soda, and sand, silica, melted together and shaped while hot, a process that is still used today. The first glass items were made from ropes of molten glass that were coiled into shapes and fused together. Not far after, in 1200 BC, molds were invented and were used to make cups and bowls. Metals in the form of gold and silver were used as ancient boxes and cups, but most common people could not afford such items. As time went on, different metals were discovered and metal alloys were created. In 12,000 CE, tin plating was discovered in Bohemia, and by the 1300s, cans of iron coated with tin were being used in Bavaria. The process of plating was kept secret until the 1600s, when the technique was stolen by the Duke of Saxony and it spread across Europe and eventually the United States. In the beginning, food was rarely stored in metal containers or cans because it was considered poisonous because of the taste of metal leaching into the food left after storing items for long periods of time. However, in the early 1800s, safe preservation of food products was discovered in France. General Napoleon Bonaparte offered money to anyone who could preserve food for his army. As a result, a French chef and baker discovered the process of boiling tin cans and the products inside as a way to preserve food for long periods of time. The first cans were created by hand, roughly at a rate of 60 cans per day. By the mid-1800s, interior enamels made of tin plate were developed, as well as the ability to heat seal tin cans shut. The materials of tin cans remained relatively unchanged until the cost of mining and development processes of aluminum began to decline, starting in 1852, and culminating in a low price of $14 per pound in 1942. The commercial aluminum foils entered the market in 1910. However, the first aluminum cans did not appear in stores until 1959. Paper is another good that is still used today for a variety of purposes. paper is considered one of the oldest forms of what is known as flexible packaging. Packaging that is not stiff, but rather pliable and will not crack when bent. As early as the 1st or 2nd century BCE, the Chinese wrapped food in sheets of treated mulberry bark. Paper-making techniques spread over the next 1,500 years to different places, including the Middle East and Europe. At first, paper was not made from wood pulp, but rather from flax fibers and old linen rags. Eventually, in 1867, paper made from wood pulp was. However, many items we recognize today were developed before the invention of wood paper pulp, including cardboard, invented by the Chinese in the late 1500s, and was originally used as a type of paper for writing. The first commercial cardboard box was produced in England in 1817, and by the 1850s, corrugated cardboard appeared. Paper bags were first developed in 1844 in England, which led to Francis Wool inventing the bag-making machine in 1852 in the United States. Eventually, glued paper sacks were created in the 1870s, and by the early 1900s, machines could print paper bags automatically. With the invention of a sturdier, multi-walled paper sack in 1925, cotton flour sacks were replaced for this new, cheaper invention. Finally, paper cartons were invented by accident in the 1870s, which opened the door to a new type of packaging called semi-flexible packaging. This eventually led to the use of cardboard cartons, which skyrocketed in use after a small company out of Battle Creek, Michigan, started selling their health foods, known as cereal, out of cardboard cartons. The company, known as Kellogg, used the paperboard boxes to advertise their brand name and logo, which prompted other companies to do the same, cementing the use of the paperboard boxes, still used today. Paper was one of the largest used products throughout the early and middle 1900s until a new flexible packaging was invented. That new flexible packaging is plastic, which comes in both flexible and rigid forms. The 7 main categories of plastic include 1. Polyethylene tetraphthalate, PET. Number 2, high-density polyethylene, HDPE. 3, polyvinyl chloride, PVC. 4, low-density polyethylene, LDPE. 5, polypropylene, PP. Number 6, polystyrene or styrofoam, PS. And 7, miscellaneous plastics, which include polycarbonate, polylactide, acrylic, styrene, fiberglass, and nylon. However, not all these plastics were invented and created at the same time. For example, styrene, used today to make latex, synthetic rubber, and polystyrene resins, aka styrofoam, was first distilled from a balsam tree in 1831. The early products were brittle until the process was refined in 1933, with foam made available worldwide in the 1950s. Styrene foam was utilized for cushioning materials, as well as disposable cups and food trays that are still in use today. Vinyl chloride was discovered in 1835. In 1947, the product began being used for molded deodorant squeeze bottles, and then as heat shrinkable films, which was an early form of plastic wrap in 1958. In recent times, some water and vegetable oil containers are made from vinyl chloride. In the 1930s, DuPont discovered polyethylene, but failed to see its potential, and it was not created again until it was discovered in Germany in 1953. Today, polyethylene is used in industrial plastic wraps and films, but is also used as number 2 plastics, high-density polyethylene, HDPE, and number 4 plastics, low-density polyethylene, LDP. HDP and LDP are commonly used to make milk jugs, plastic wrap, grocery bags, and shampoo bottles, to name a few. Polyethylene tetraphthalate, PET, has only become available since the 1970s. This semi-rigid plastic is commonly found as containers for beverages and food, such as water bottles. PET products are even used for hot-filled products, such as teas and jellies, which means the food and drink goes into the bottle hot for sanitizing reasons. Unfortunately, as our history of packaging evolved, so has our waste. Plastic in particular poses serious hazards for our planet and our health as they pile up in landfills and pollute our waters. Learning a bit about packaging reveals a long history of human innovation and highlights just how recently we developed a reliance on plastic. With a history full of invention and change, is it so hard to imagine a more sustainable future, a world without plastic and the waste it produces?